One introduction. DHWO, the United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only. For home building and furniture building, for just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions, yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry, and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable, wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree, but it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lungs, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom, the Eco-Design Wood Stove, and International Convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. DHWO purple air PM 2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM 2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM 2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary.
Hi, my name is Lily. Andrew gave you the intro to residents against wood smoke emission particulates and their concern for air pollution from indoor residential wood burning. Residents against wood smoke emission particulates, or ROSEP, would like every near neighbor of an indoor residential wood burner whose wood smoke enters their yards and sickens the near neighbors to have a purple air PM 2.5 monitor hanging from the eaves of their home to measure the level of PM 2.5 entering their yards. That measurement of air pollution should be used as evidence of unnecessary air pollution, and each indoor residential wood burner should be shut down based on that evidence, one indoor residential wood burner at a time if necessary. The presentation by Andrew ended at 2 minutes 5 seconds. The same presentation by Emma starts at 2 minutes 3 seconds before the end of this podcast. So I am Lily, your timekeeper, and you can start the next podcast at 2 minutes 5 seconds in if you would not like to see the presentation by Andrew a second time. This presentation by me, Lily, ends at 5 minutes in. What you will see in the main content of this ROSEP podcast will be news about air pollution from indoor residential wood burning, and how that air pollution is being combated by ordinary people just like you who are unfortunately near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners at this time. There will also be news about unnecessary and highly polluting use of wood as fuel in industrial wood burners and preventable air pollution from wood burning. Wildfires. There will also be news about air pollution from PM 2.5 from gas-powered cars. There will also be news about airborne diseases which are also preventable with vaccines such as COVID-19 and measles and whooping cough, to name just a few. In 2025, residents against wood smoke emission particulates is also concerned with combating the Trump destruction of government funding for programs which protect human health through the Department of Health and Human Services, and Trump destruction of programs which fund the science and medical research plan to protect human health from preventable illnesses. Protecting human health is a patriotic act, and our defense against enemies is weakened if we are not as healthy as we can be. Heat pump rebates are now offered by the federal government, distributed through the eligible United States, are available in 2025, and are the best, cleanest, and now cheapest alternative to indoor residential wood burning if that burning is actually done to purportedly save money. Wind and solar as sources of the electricity that powers heat pumps and electric cars is also cheaper than burning wood. The adverse health effects that are caused by indoor residential wood burning also come at a cost to near neighbors, both in shortening and ending their lives, and in actual hospital, clinic, and funeral costs. Instead of being compensated monetarily, near neighbors should instead be able to achieve immediate relief by stopping indoor residential wood burning in their hyper-localized neighborhoods, which relief readings from purple air PM 2.5 monitors used as evidence of air pollution will help them achieve. Welcome to news about hopeful scientific and medical achievements that will also help us achieve the goal of clean air to breathe.
Episode 57 DHWO June 13, 2025 The Trump Big Bill more regressive than any major law in decades. In episode DHWO1 headlines to air pollution from wood burning, the Canadian wildfires in Manitoba and Saskatchewan, what to know about smoke and air quality. 3 The Trump Big Bill more regressive than any major law in decades. 4 What we know about the No Kings protests on Saturday. 5 Do Californians really pay Trump bills? 6 Trump blocks California EV rules and latest move to Rein in the state. California leaders said the state intends to challenge the move in court and to find new ways to move drivers toward electric vehicles. Main content. 1A headlines. The New York Times June 13, 2025 Air pollution from wood burning, the Canadian wildfires in Manitoba and Saskatchewan, what to know about smoke and air quality. The New York Times Democrats' opinion, Obama is not going to save you. The New York Times Nature and Science Agriculture history, you can eat. The New York Times Nature and Science soaring temperatures threaten crops, so scientists are looking to alter the plans. The New York Times Trump actions, State Department official posts then deletes attack on colleague about NATO. The New York Times Trump actions, Trump leaves European leaders praying for a boring G7 summit. The New York Times Trump actions, the Trump new Apprentice boardroom, the Oval Office. The New York Times Trump actions affected by war, who are the Iranian generals killed by Israel. Here is what we know. The New York Times Trump budget cuts opinion, the one area where the Trump National Institute of Health NIH cuts might actually make sense. The New York Times Trump budget cuts, the Trump big bill would be more regressive than any major law in decades. The New York Times Trump budget cuts, what we know about No Kings protests ahead of the Trump military parade on Saturday. The New York Times Trump tariffs and influence of war, oil prices surge and stock markets stumble after Israel strikes Iran. The New York Times Trump tariffs, Trump live updates, home appliances will be targeted with tariffs. The New York Times Trump tariffs, where is the inflation from tariffs? Just wait, economists say. The New York Times Ukraine, Russian forces expand fighting to a new region of eastern Ukraine. The New York Times 1B headlines. The New York Times June 12, 2025 California and Trump budget cuts. Do Californians really pay Trump bills? The New York Times climate change could complicate anti-submarine warfare. The New York Times Democrats 6 takeaways from the Gavin Newsom appearance on the Daily. The New York Times human interest, Brian Wilson and Sly Stone pop world builders dogged by darkness. The New York Times human interest, what is the best way to wake up? The New York Times India, Val McTopper tenacious tiger conservationist in India is dead. The New York Times Medicine and Science raw view, smoking still causes cancer, although anti-heroes in cable TV are pushing cigarette smoking for some unknown monetary reason. From the materialists to the bear, pop culture takes up smoking again. The New York Times Medicine and Science raw view, and RFK Jr. anti-science leadership in vaccines, what the RFK Jr. zip shakeup could mean for vaccines. The New York Times Nature and Science in the calls of bonobos. Scientists hear hints of language. The New York Times Nature and Science opinion, the undermining of science in America. The New York Times Nature and Science shining a light on the world of microproteins. The New York Times Nature and Science, the health benefits of gardening. The New York Times Trump actions, ABC says Terry Moran suspended for social media posts will not return. The New York Times Trump air pollution promotion, Trump blocks California EV rules and latest move to Rein in the state. The New York Times Trump budget cuts, raw view and cuts to public broadcasting. Trump live updates, news on steel tariffs, farm workers and public broadcast funding. The New York Times Trump budget cuts, raw view, and Trump was unable to identify with who is good and who is evil in Les Miserables. A night out for Trump at the theater with a pocket of dissent. The New York Times Trump budget cuts, GOP senators want fewer cuts to food aid, teeing up a fight with the House. The New York Times Trump budget cuts, head of FEMA command center quits after Trump says he will phase out the agency. The New York Times Trump budget cuts, how every House member voted on $9 billion in proposed spending cuts. The New York Times Trump budget cuts opinion, Elizabeth Warren, Trump is right about this one thing. The New York Times Trump budget cuts opinion, red state universities will get hit by the Trump cuts. To the New York Times Trump immigration opinion, why the Trump immigration crackdown defines the right. The New York Times Trump immigration, Republicans to press Hochul, Waltz and Pritzker on immigration and hearing. The New York Times Trump immigration, Trump tells farmers changes are coming to immigration crackdown. The New York Times Trump tariffs, China raw view, now sometimes called from the China point of view, the art of the stall, new China trade trade deal takes the U.S. back to where it started. The New York Times. Trump tariffs China, the art of the stall, the China strategy for dealing with Trump. The New York Times. 2. Air pollution from wood burning. The Canadian wildfires in Manitoba and Saskatchewan. What to know about smoke and air quality. Canada faces a challenging wildfire season. What to know as fires rage in the west. Wildfires are forecast to continue and expand through the summer in western Canada and parts of the Canadian North. Except edited by Regressive for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, June 12, 2025. Western Canada and parts of the Canadian North will face a challenging wildfire situation over the summer, Canadian officials predicted on Thursday, but at this point they said the season appears unlikely to match that of 2023, when fires ignited throughout much of the country, sending choking smoke to the United States and as far as Europe. There were 225 wildfires burning across Canada on Thursday, with 121 of them out of control. Government officials said that recent rainfall in parts of Western Canada might temporarily reduce new outbreaks but was not sufficient to extinguish the current fires. Long-term weather trends, officials said, indicate temperatures will be higher than usual in Western Canada and areas to its north this summer, leading to a continued high risk of wildfires there. More than 30,000 people have evacuated their homes, mainly in the provinces of Saskatchewan and Manitoba, where officials have declared a state of emergency. Many of those evacuees, as well as other from northwestern Ontario, have fled from Indigenous communities and in some cases were airlifted out by the Canadian Armed Forces. Last week, smoke from the wildfires drifted as far north as Newfoundland and as far south as Florida. 2 people were killed in May after a small town in Manitoba was engulfed in flames. Their deaths were an ominous start to the Canadian wildfire season, which usually runs from March until October. A prairie region that includes the provinces of Saskatchewan and Manitoba and much of Alberta has seen intense above-average heat this spring that, combined with a stationary high-pressure system in central Canada which causes air to sink downward and dry out, has primed conditions for wildfires. According to Climate Central, a non-profit research group, 8 firefighters were killed in 2023, the Canadian worst wildfire season on record, but there were no civilian deaths that year. 7,100 wildfires burned 37 million acres, an area larger than England, according to the Canadian government. Scientists later called the wildfires the top carbon emitter of 2023. 3. The Trump big bill would be more regressive than any major law in decades. Excerpts edited by Regressive for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, June 12, 2025. The Republican megabill now before the Senate cuts taxes for high earners and reduces benefits for the poor. If it is enacted, that combination would make it more regressive than any major tax or entitlement law in decades. The original major tax cut bills from the George W. Bush administration delivered an even greater share of benefits to the highest earners than the current bill would, but unlike the Trump bill, the Bush tax cut did not cut benefits to the poor. That made the laws regressive, but no group looked worse off. The cases of emergency stimulus. One other major category of bills has come during times of acute economic stress, when the government temporarily increases spending, often disproportionately aimed at providing assistance to the poor. This happened during the Great Recession in the late 2000s and the COVID pandemic. Those major stimulus bills had no losing group. The 2025 bill, in addition to its regressivity, adds to the deficit amid a much healthier economy. About the data we collected, distributional analysis for major tax and social welfare bills dating to the 1990s. Most were also reconciliation bills. For what we know about the No Kings protests on Saturday, organizers have planned demonstrations in cities and towns across the country on the same day as the Trump parade in Washington to celebrate the Army. Excerpts edited by Regressive for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, June 13, 2025. Planned protests against Trump that are expected to be among the largest since the Trump second term began will be held across the country on Saturday. The demonstrations will occur in all 50 states, and organizers have estimated that there will be roughly 2,000 of them, ranging from small groups in more rural communities to larger rallies in major cities including New York, Philadelphia, Chicago, Atlanta, Dallas and Denver. According to a map provided by organizers, there are some 36 events scheduled in Indiana alone. Protests are also scheduled in other countries including Britain, Mexico and Germany. The Main events are slated for Atlanta, Chicago, Houston, New York, Phoenix, Philadelphia and Charlotte, Tennessee, but there are also protests planned in smaller communities like Lewisburg, West Virginia, Pinedale, Wyoming and Moab, Utah. Philadelphia, city rich with revolutionary history, will host the event national live stream. One major city is notably absent from the list of planned demonstrations: Washington, the site of the military parade. The omission was intentional. Trump warned that any protesters who rallied against the military parade in Washington would be met with very big force instead of drawing more attention to the military parade and perhaps giving Trump the opportunity to carry out his threat. Organizers want the focus to be on the people. We want to create contrast, not conflict. What time will the protests be held? While plans and schedules vary from city to city, many are scheduled between late morning and early afternoon. At the flagship protest in Philadelphia, organizers plan on leading a march from Love Park to the Philadelphia Museum of Art. 5. Do Californians really pay the Trump bills? The rising tension between Trump and Governor Gavin Newsom is reviving questions about who pays into and who takes from the federal government. Excerpt edited by Ross Epp for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, June 12, 2025. In his escalating conflict with Trump, Governor Gavin Newsom suggested last week that California had some leverage over the federal government. We pay over $80 billion more in taxes than we get back, he wrote on X. Maybe it is time to cut that off. His office followed up with a news release titled "Californians Pay the Trump Bills." In case you missed it, California is the biggest donor state in the country, providing around $83 billion more to the federal government than it receives from the federal government, nearly 3 times as much as the next biggest donor state. Though Newsom has since said he would not ask state residents to withhold federal taxes, he said he still felt the need to respond to the Trump threats to cut off federal funding to the state and to the deployment of active duty military to Los Angeles amid protests. The term donor states might be relatively obscure, but it captures a dynamic that underlies many national policy debates, and it taps into long-standing philosophical questions about whether it is fair that some states prop up the country more than others, and whether that is the right way to look at things in the first place. Which states are donor states? Most of the donor states are rich blue states. Think Massachusetts, New Jersey, Washington, and yes, California. The recipient states are mostly poor states like New Mexico, West Virginia, and Mississippi. There are a few exceptions like Virginia, a blue state whose residents receive on net about $12,000 in federal contracts and wages more than they pay in taxes. On average, residents from recipient states receive about $3,000 more than they pay. Donor states net payment per resident: Massachusetts $4,800, New Jersey $4,300, Washington $3,500, California $3,200, New Hampshire $3,100, New York $2,300, Minnesota $1,900, Colorado $1,700, Connecticut $1,500, Utah $1,400, Wyoming $1,300, Illinois $1,300, Nevada $700 are the recipient states' net receipt per resident. New Mexico $14,800, Maryland $12,300, Virginia $11,600, West Virginia $10,300, Alaska $10,000, Mississippi $9,100, Kentucky $8,500, Alabama $8,200, Hawaii $7,600, Oklahoma $6,600, Louisiana $6,400, Maine $6,300, Arkansas $5,600, South Carolina $5,600, Arizona $4,400, Missouri $4,300, North Carolina $3,800, Rhode Island $3,600, Montana $3,500, Delaware $3,400, Indiana $3,300, Vermont $3,300, Tennessee $3,200, Ohio $3,100, Pennsylvania $2,700, Michigan $2,700, Kansas $2,300, South Dakota $2,200, Georgia $2,100, $2,000 Iowa, $2,000 North Dakota, $2,000 Oregon, $2,000 Idaho, $1,800 Texas, $1,500 Wisconsin, $1,400 Florida, $800 Nebraska, $200. The Rockefeller Institute has been tabulating estimates for years, and its numbers shown above are often the ones cited by politicians themselves. What determines if your state is a donor or recipient? It is a simple equation: taxes paid to the federal government minus payments received from it. If it is positive, you are a donor state. If it is negative, you are a recipient state. The math of each state varies somewhat, but here's how the taxes paid roughly break down: 85% personal income taxes or social insurance taxes like Social Security and Medicare, 15% corporate income taxes or smaller taxes like the estate tax or excise taxes on gas and alcohol. When a politician says a state is paying the federal government, it mostly refers to the money flowing from the residents and private companies of a state, not the state itself. Saying Massachusetts pays $20,000 per capita really means all the federal taxes paid by individuals and organizations in Massachusetts averages out to $20,000 per resident. No matter what phrasing you use, a state like Massachusetts pays much more than West Virginia, which sends about $8,500 per resident to the federal government. On the other side is payments flowing from the federal government to states: 60% direct payments to individuals, almost all Social Security and Medicare, 20% grants to states to disperse primarily Medicaid, the temporary assistance for needy families welfare program, and things like highway funding and housing assistance, 20% wages to federal employees or contractors. Direct payments from the federal government do not vary as much as taxes do. West Virginia receives the most direct payments per state, around $12,000 per resident, while states at the bottom of the list like Colorado or California receive about $8,500. Why do politicians use this term? It can be a very useful political message, especially for representatives from wealthy states. The first person to push the concept was the New York Democratic Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan in the 1980s and 1990s. Governor Newsom recently used the term to mirror the Moynihan sentiment. In a recent podcast, he used the California donor status to argue his state was a tentpole of the American economy while pointing out Texas was a taker. It is a mythology that somehow red states are dominating and blue states are struggling, he said. In 2020, Governor Andrew Cuomo used the term to defend federal coronavirus relief spending in New York, emphasizing that New York was the no-one donor state, while the Kentucky of Mitch McConnell was taking our dollars out of the pot. 6. Trump blocks California EV rules in latest move to rein in the state. California leaders said the state intends to challenge the move in court and to find new ways to move drivers toward electric vehicles. Excerpts edited by Ross Epp. For brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, June 12, 2025. Trump signed joint resolutions of Congress on Thursday that block the California effort to phase out gasoline-powered vehicles, his latest attempt to reduce the power of the most populous state in the nation. The Republican-led Congress passed the resolutions in May to reverse the approval by the Biden administration of the California electric vehicle efforts. When signed by Trump, joint resolutions revoking federal rules carry the force of law and are not subject to judicial review. Even so, the move drew an immediate legal challenge from California as well as an executive order from Gavin Newsom, directing state officials to find another path that would move California drivers toward electric vehicles and encourage companies to make them. On Thursday, Trump took aim at the California long-standing authority under the Federal Clean Air Act of 1970 to set pollution standards for the state that are more strict than federal limits, and at Governor Newsom's ambition to fight climate change with an aggressive transition to electric vehicles. Repealing the California automobile policy is central to the Trump agenda of bolstering the reduction and use of fossil fuels in the United States while eliminating policies that promote renewable energy and reduce planet-warming greenhouse gas emissions. The Trump action reversed a Biden administration decision that allowed the state to require that electric vehicles make up a progressively larger share of new vehicles sold in California until 2035, when the state would ban the sale of new gasoline-powered cars entirely. State leaders see the Transition to electric cars as a tool to improve California air quality. The California ban on the sale of new gasoline-powered cars did not apply to used vehicles, so it would not have completely eliminated them from the roads, but voter concerns about the California high cost of living gave Republicans and some Democrats reason to object to the California plan because electric vehicles tend to cost more than comparable gasoline-powered models. The executive order that Newsom signed Thursday directs the California Air Resources Board to come up with new ways to encourage electric vehicle use and reduce emissions. According to the Newsom office, under the state would prioritize funding for EV rebates and will seek to develop new incentive programs, and it would steer state agencies to purchase fleet vehicles from manufacturers who agree to phase out new gasoline-powered cars. I am signing an executive order to keep California on track with our world-leading transition to cleaner cars, Newsom said in a statement.
One introduction. Regressive. The United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only for home building and furniture building. For just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions, yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry, and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable, wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree. But it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen, and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lung, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom. The Eco-Design Wood Stove and International Convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. Regressive. Purple air. PM 2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM 2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM 2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary.